Pumping. Bitcoin is pumping together with the rest of the crypto industry. Over the last 10 days or so, Bitcoin is up around 30%. Is this the start of a new bull market in the longer term? And is Bitcoin stretched to the upside in the shorter term? The short answer is yes and yes, but the nuance is important, so let's have a look at the details. Starting with the typical Bitcoin cycles, which do last for a couple of months. This has been the case for multiple years on Bitcoin already, and the ongoing cycle that started in the first half of September has already been going on for around 44 days. We see that price is poking above extremely wide Bollinger Bands, and the 14-day RSI is extremely high as well. It's at the level of 88. In fact, it's the highest level all the way since the beginning of 2023, when we saw this huge pump out of that previous bear market bottom. We see that into that RSI peak, Bitcoin price actually pumped by around 33%. That's a greater pump that we are observing right now. As I mentioned, over the last 10 days or so, Bitcoin is up around 30%. So it is all nice and exciting, but the reality is the usual cycle duration is around a couple of months, and we are now a month and a half into this cycle. So perhaps sometime over the next 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, we are going to see a bit of a cool down into the cycle low. Although this excitement at the moment might actually take a few days before it starts turning the prices back down. Talking about the excitement and how it affects prices, it's important to look at historical and current market sentiment. After all, you usually want to buy when blood is flowing on the streets, and when everyone is getting excited, you want to avoid the FOMO, the fear of missing out. So looking at this optimism index, the market sentiment on Bitcoin, looking at it over the last year since November 2022, we see that the optimism index right now is extremely high. It's as high again as at the very beginning of 2023. Another thing to consider here is how long the sentiment stays high. So the green solid line over here is the 10-day moving average of this optimism index. Usually these Bitcoin cycles do top with this solid line, the 10-day moving average of the optics, somewhere above the level of 60, and we've only just about seen this 10-day moving average break above the level of 60. It's at 62 right now. So as I mentioned, there is probably still another few days for the prices to continue pushing somewhat higher before they plateau and finally turn back down into the cycle low. Talking about how much time we have before the prices plateau, again looking at the history of the previous 3 cycles since that longer term bottom around $16,000 on Bitcoin, we see that once this 10-day moving average of the optics tops, once the optimism drops and the 10-day DMA starts declining as well, we still have perhaps another couple of weeks before the prices plateau and give one last poke to the top of the cycle. So while you do want to avoid FOMO when everyone is getting excited, when everyone is talking about Bitcoin gaining 30% in about a week, we also do want to remember that the party is perhaps going to continue, maybe for another couple of weeks, as we have seen historically. On the other hand though, this time the party might continue for slightly shorter, perhaps 1 week or so, as the previous sentiment tops took place at the beginning of these previous 3 cycles, whereas at the moment the cycle is already 44 days long. So while in the longer term, yes, I am still extremely bullish on Bitcoin, in the shorter term though, perhaps it's not a bad idea to trim a little bit off the top. Perhaps reduce your positions slightly over the next 1 or 2 weeks and wait for an eventual correction down into the cycle low. And we do want to realize that that eventual correction might not have to be extremely severe, perhaps something like this, retesting the previous cycle high around the level of $31,000. So a continued party for another week or so, a bit of a plateau and a decline down into the cycle low, giving us somewhat of an average or perhaps a bit of an extended cycle. Again, those usually last for around a couple of months. So if I move this squiggly circle over here into November rather than keeping it at December, that will bring us closer to that average duration of around a couple of months. and this would align slightly better with seasonality. So looking at seasonality back to 2015, when one of those previous bear markets in Bitcoin finished, we see that October is usually a very strong month for Bitcoin, followed by a usual correction down into November. Again, seasonality agrees here, perhaps another few days, another week or so of an upward momentum into very early November before an eventual cool down into the cycle low. For now though, we still have time before the cool down, things are still hot, we can still enjoy the party. While partying though, we just need to remember to keep our heads cool and avoid the FOMO. After all, if you zoom out, you'll realize that whether Bitcoin is moving down or up into this bull market all the way into 2020-2021, there are corrections on the way, and even if Bitcoin retests the new all-time high sometime after its halving, the move towards its new all-time high isn't going to be monotonic. Instead, we always have 3 steps up, 1 or 2 steps down, again 3 steps up, again 1 or 2 steps down, and so on. For more details on cryptocurrencies, precious metals, particularly some of the most promising developers that are going to give you that rocket launch up once the precious metals break to new all-time highs, join us at myfinancesteacher.org, where we have regular updates on some of the most critical assets. One such notable asset is perhaps nickel, and we have the best nickel report on the internet that came out just about 1 or 2 weeks ago. So join us now at myfinancesteacher.org. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Bye-bye.